Diggs, traded, Texans, unbelievable. Oh my God, this division's gonna suck for us. Welcome everybody to JG9 News, where we talk all things NFL all the time. I'm Jared Gary, and I represent the 904 from the 602, and today we're talking about these two teams behind me right here because they just pulled off a blockbuster trade earlier today. The Houston Texans offseason of greatness continues. They've gotten a lot better this offseason. Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry bolstering the defensive line, and now they just got a premier wide receiver in Stefon Diggs because the Buffalo Bills have traded their top wide receiver from the last 4 years to the Houston Texans. In this trade, the Bills get a 2025 second-round pick. The Houston Texans get a 2024 sixth-round pick, a 2025 fifth-round pick, and, of course, Stefon Diggs, the centerpiece in this all. In Diggs' entire career so far in the NFL, 810 catches, nearly 10,000 receiving yards, 67 touchdowns, but his last 4 seasons played with the Buffalo Bills after 4 seasons with the Vikings. In those 4 seasons, made the Pro Bowl all 4 years. 445 catches, 5,372 yards, 37 touchdowns, an AP First Team All-Pro in 2020, an AP Second Team All-Pro in 2022, and he led the NFL in catches over the last 4 years. Now, according to Bills general manager Brendan Beane, he said on this trade, "I want to thank Steph for 4 really good seasons. Really appreciate everything he brought to the team. Was a big part of us winning 4 divisions. These moves are never easy. Very hard. Not made overnight or anything like that, but anytime you make a move like this, you're trying to win. And sometimes people may not see that. This is by no means the Bills giving up or trying to take a step back or anything like that. Everything we do, we're trying to win. And we're going to continue to do that." Now, I want to talk about what this trade means for both parties. I want to start with the Buffalo Bills, and before I even go any further, keep in mind that everything I say with Buffalo, when it comes to the Houston Texans, I'm going to talk about why this makes a lot of sense for them. But I am going to say that I don't think the Bills got fleeced here. I think this is a good move for Buffalo. Not saying that they won the trade by any means, but I'm not going to say that they got outright fleeced here. Obviously, there were some locker room concerns with Diggs. We saw the Bengal playoff game in the 2022 divisional where he sprinted out of the locker room. He yelled at his teammates and the coaches. There was constant frustration about not getting the ball. He was a locker room cancer, and I think all the reports coming out of Buffalo over the last few years indicate that. Viking fans saw this coming a mile away. He was also kind of a cancer in Minnesota. It's the smelly shoe analogy. If, let's say, you smell someone and they smell bad, probably they smell bad. But if everyone smells bad, it's probably you. Stefon Diggs, he might be the problem. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. In the words of the great Taylor Swift. On top of that, Diggs is on the wrong side of 30, and he is declining. He is on the decline. The final 10 games of last season, including the playoffs, fairly pedestrian numbers. 47 catches, 422 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's it. That's a pace of 717 yards over a 17-game season, which puts him outside the top 50 receivers in football. In the second half of last season, over the final 8 games of the regular season, he had 37 catches for 349 yards and 1 touchdown. The second half of last season in the regular season, that was his production. He had the 59th most receiving yards in football last year across the final 9 weeks of the season. Guys with more receiving yards in that stretch, just to name a few. Demarcus Robinson, he had more receiving yards in that stretch than Diggs. Tucker Kraft, he had more receiving yards than Diggs. Chiggy Okonkwo, the Titans tight end, he had more receiving yards. Romeo Doubs, Jake Ferguson. On top of that, 1 touchdown over the final 8 games of the regular season, and 1 touchdown over the final 10 games if you count the 2 playoff games. 86 players had multiple receiving touchdowns from week 10 on. Some of those guys include Little Jordan Humphrey, Colby Parkinson, Parker Washington, Rashid Shaheed, Alec Pierce, Adam Troutman. You know who wasn't one of them? Stefon Diggs. The Bills' offense does not need Diggs to thrive. The offense was at its best and was at its most efficient in the second half of last year when Diggs did nothing. The first 4 games of that winning streak that eventually propelled Buffalo to win the AFC East, Diggs had 127 yards and no touchdowns. And that's not across one game. That's across the 4 games combined. That's an average of about 30 yards per game. The Bills are in a bit of a retooling phase right now. Obviously, they were in a lot of cap trouble. They had the least cap space in football. Had to get rid of a lot of guys. I can't say they're in a rebuilding phase because they do have Josh Allen, and he's a franchise quarterback, and they're always going to compete as long as Josh Allen is under center, but they are in a retooling phase, and this is a smart move for Buffalo because it frees up over $18 million in cap space in 2025, $20 million in 2026, and $18 million in 2027. So this year might be rough, but they'll be right back on track in 2025. Yes, you incur the dead cap this year. They take on a lot of dead cap. The Texans aren't taking on anything this year, but you have tons of flexibility next year, especially because the Von Miller contract, one of the worst free agent contracts of all time, can come off the books to some extent. So this is a smart move on Buffalo's end, considering his lack of production, considering the fact that the offense wasn't necessarily needing him, considering his decline, considering his character, considering the cap space. This makes a ton of sense for the Buffalo Bills. Now, obviously, this trade indicates the fact that the Bills need a wide receiver. You lost Gabe Davis, you lost Diggs. I know we said Diggs wasn't that important to Buffalo's success over the second half of last season, but the wide receiver unit was already thin. This doesn't really change anything in terms of the fact that the Bills need a receiver badly, because there are only two guys that I can say with certainty make this roster a wide receiver. Obviously, Khalil Shakir, he came on strong the second half of last season, liked the guy a lot, and then Curtis Samuel, who they signed in free agency. Maybe KJ Hamler, if he stays healthy. I think he's got a lot of potential. I like him coming out of college at Penn State. He's a speedster. He did some stuff with Denver when he was healthy, but the problem is that he just couldn't stay healthy. If Hamler stays healthy, I'll say he makes the roster. But other than those three guys, there's no one really that I can say with certainty makes this Bills roster at wide receiver, and teams carry 5 or even 6 receivers. So you figure that Buffalo is definitely going to draft multiple receivers early on, sometime on round 1 or in the first 2 days of the draft, and then someone in round 4 potentially. I'd be very shocked if the Bills do not draft multiple receivers within the first 4 rounds of the draft. At the very least, they're drafting 1 receiver in the first 4 rounds. I think they'll draft 2, and this trade indicates that. But again, Stefon Diggs, great career in Buffalo. It was up and down in terms of the off-the-field stuff and in terms of the locker room presence, but the on-field production was definitely there, even if it did decline over the second half of last season. Having said that, I want to make that very clear. Diggs was on the decline. He might not be as good as he was anymore. But this move is fantastic for the Houston Texans. Again, this trade makes a lot of sense for Buffalo. They had to get rid of him. But for the Houston Texans, I unfortunately really, really like this move. The Texans might have the deepest receiving unit in football. They took themselves out of getting one of the top receivers when they traded pick number 23 to the Vikings for pick 42 and a future second. But think about it. They trade away a 2025 second-round pick to get Diggs. That 2025 second was from the Vikings. So in essence, the Texans traded down 19 spots to get Diggs. Don't look at this like they gave up a 2025 second-round pick, because that's not really true. It's not their 2025 second. It's the second-round pick that they got from the Vikings when they traded down in the first round. They moved down 19 spots to get a guy that's led the NFL in receptions in the last 4 seasons from 2020 to 2023, as made to the Pro Bowl in each of the last 4 seasons. It's a great move for Houston. It's a phenomenal move for Houston, especially because this wide receiving unit is now stacked. Your 1, 2, 3 is Stefon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. Who's stopping Tank Dell in the slot? You put Tank Dell in the slot? Who the heck is stopping him? That's the best 1, 2, 3 punch in football. And behind him, you got Robert Woods. You got Noah Brown. You got John Mitchell, who came on in the playoffs. You got Xavier Hutchinson. You're not carrying 7 guys. One of those guys is not making the roster. John Mitchell, Xavier Hutchinson, one of those guys will miss out because the Texans are that deep at wide receiver. Not only do they have the best 1, 2, 3 punch at wide receiver, arguably, they have the deepest wide receiving unit in football. The Texans, I'd be flabbergasted if they take a wide receiver, because they've got 7 quality wideouts or young wideouts with potential, and you kept 6 wideouts on the 53-man roster. I'd be stunned if they take a wideout, because you got 7 already that can make a team. One of these Texans wideouts will be on another team next year. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know if they trade a guy. Maybe they trade a guy like Robert Woods. I don't know, but one of these guys will not be on the roster next year, because Houston is just that stacked at wide receiver. It's a good problem to have. Obviously, Texans have a super deep wide receiving unit now, and this is what good teams do. This is a model organization, and something I never thought I'd say about the Texans after the last few years. If you have a franchise quarterback on a rookie contract, and let's be very clear, C.J. Stroud, after 1 season, I can safely say he's a franchise quarterback. If you have that, and you have a boatload of cap space, you don't go cheap. You surround him with as much talent as possible to increase your chances at winning the Super Bowl while he's on the rookie deal, and you increase that talent by acquiring contracts, acquiring players that are good, and acquiring contracts that will come off the books by the time Stroud gets the monster deal. It's the best time for their windows. Let's say you keep Diggs for 4 seasons, he's off the books after 2027 in his mid-30s. Okay, well, it doesn't really make a difference because CJ Stroud is still on his rookie contract. He's still on his rookie deal. He'll be on the 5th-year option in 2027. So you're not really hurting your long-term chances whatsoever. You might as well go all in while you have a franchise quarterback on a rookie contract. It's the best time for your window. And the Texans are absolutely capitalizing on it with this offseason of theirs. Danico Autry, Danielle Hunter. They're really bolstering the defensive line. They need some help in the secondary, which I think they're going to address now, but wide receiver, they've got a great 1-2-3 punch. Again, I don't want to see the Bills rob the Texans here because, again, Diggs had 4 straight Pro Bowls, 4 straight seasons with 100-plus receptions, 6 straight seasons with 1,000-plus yards, and the Texans basically just traded down 19 spots. I get it for both sides. Believe me, I get it for both sides. For the Bills, they had to do this move. For the Houston Texans, even if Diggs is on the decline, even if last season's second half was what we're going to get and was not an anomaly, you still got a solid, at the very least, contributing receiver, and you traded down 19 spots to do it. It's a phenomenal trade for the Texans. I like the move for Buffalo, but Houston just got a heck of a lot better. And obviously, Kansas City is going to be the favorite in the AFC West, but don't be surprised if the Houston Texans are the second favorite. They have never made it to the AFC Championship before, but they've got their best shot in years to do it. At the very least, they are the overwhelming favorites now to win the AFC South, and we'll see what happens with these two teams behind me right here. But Buffalo Bills, Houston Texans, a monster trade, and we'll see how it plays out in 2024. But what are your thoughts on the Diggs trade? Do you like the move for Buffalo? Do you like the move for Houston? Do you think this increases Houston's chances of winning the Super Bowl or the AFC? Do you think they're the lock to win the AFC South? For Buffalo, do you think the move makes sense? Do you think they're still going to be good this year even without Diggs? How important do you think Diggs was to Buffalo? How would you grade that trade that Buffalo made with Diggs and the first-round pick in 2020 with the Vikings that eventually became Justin Jefferson? How would you grade his tenure in Buffalo? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. A lot to break down here, and I want to hear everything you have to say. But that's going to do it for this episode of JJ9 News. Be sure you like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check my main channel, Jaguar9, where we talk all things NFL history all the time. Until next time, this is Jaguar9 signing off. And as always, go Jags.